Your heart races when you see their name on your phone. Your stomach twists into knots before every date. You can't sleep, can't eat, can't think straight. And you call this love? Here's what nobody told you. 73% of people in toxic relationships report feeling more physiological arousal than those in healthy ones. That racing heart? That's not passion. That's your nervous system screaming danger. But here's the twisted part, the part that keeps therapists like me employed. Your brain can't tell the difference, and there are people out there who know this, people who've turned your body's alarm system into their playground. Let me share something with you, something from the confidential files that don't make it into psychology textbooks. There's a phenomenon we call misattribution of arousal, and it's been weaponized. In 1974, researchers Dutton and Aaron conducted an experiment on two bridges. One was stable, the other swayed dangerously over a canyon. They had an attractive woman approach men on both bridges and asked them to participate in a survey. The men on the shaky bridge were significantly more likely to call her afterward, to interpret their fear-induced arousal as romantic attraction, the elevated heart rate, the adrenaline, the hyper-awareness. Their brains labeled it as desire. Now imagine someone engineering that bridge in your everyday life, creating the shake, manufacturing the fear, and watching you fall. This isn't theoretical. This is happening in your dating apps right now, in your relationships, in the situationships that drain you but somehow keep you coming back. The pattern is so common, it has a diagnostic signature. Intermittent reinforcement paired with manufactured uncertainty. They text you constantly for 3 days, making you feel like the center of their universe. Then silence. 48 hours of nothing. Your cortisol spikes. Your attachment system goes haywire. You check your phone every 3 minutes. The physical sensation, that desperate need to hear from them, feels exactly like intense desire. But pull back the curtain and you'll see something darker. You're not craving them. You're craving the end of the anxiety they created. Let me take you inside a therapy session from last year. Woman in her early 30s, successful, intelligent, the kind of person who'd never describe herself as vulnerable. She came in because she couldn't understand why she was so obsessed with a man who treated her terribly. Inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, occasionally cruel. But the sex was incredible, she said. The chemistry was undeniable. So I asked her to describe the physical sensations she felt around him. Racing thoughts. Tight chest, hypervigilance, inability to relax, constant low-grade nausea. I asked her to describe anxiety. She went quiet. Because they were the same list. The exact same list. Her body had been trying to warn her for 6 months, but she'd been conditioned to read the warning signals as attraction. And here's the disturbing part. He knew. In their text exchanges, which he showed me, you could see him calibrating. When she started to pull away, when her nervous system briefly found peace, he'd send exactly the right message to spike her anxiety again. Not enough to make her leave, just enough to keep her hooked. The research on this is devastating once you see it. Studies on trauma bonding show that relationships with high variability in emotional intensity create stronger attachment than stable, consistently positive ones. Your brain releases more dopamine during unpredictable rewards than predictable ones. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. And some people, whether consciously or through learned behavior, have figured out how to turn themselves into slot machines. They condition you to associate their presence with relief from the anxiety they created in their absence. You think you're addicted to them. You're actually addicted to the brief moments when they stop hurting you. There's a name for what happens in your body during these cycles: cortisol-dopamine confusion. Cortisol is your stress hormone. It prepares you for danger, keeps you alert, makes your heart pound. Dopamine is your reward chemical, the one that says, pay attention to this matters, this feels good. In healthy attraction, dopamine leads. In anxiety-based attachment, cortisol floods your system first, and your brain scrambles to make sense of why you're so activated around this person. The easiest explanation? Must be passion. Must be chemistry, must be fate. Your brain is doing its best to narrate your physiological state, but it's working with incomplete information. It doesn't know that the activation is a warning, not an invitation. Here's where it gets even more sinister. The people who exploit this pattern often have their own relationship with anxiety that makes them perfect predators. They're not necessarily narcissists or sociopaths, though some are. Many of them are just as dysregulated as you, but they've learned that creating chaos gives them a sense of control they can't find anywhere else. They grew up in unpredictable environments where love was conditional, intermittent, laced with fear. So that's what love feels like to them. Calm, stable affection doesn't register as real. It has no charge. They need the drama, the intensity, the constant uncertainty, and they need you to need it too, so they manufacture it. They create the conditions for your anxiety, then position themselves as the only source of relief. The most disturbing cases I've seen involve what we call anxiety farming. It's a term that emerged from forums where manipulators share tactics, and yes, those forums exist, thriving in corners of the internet you probably don't want to know about. The strategy is simple. Identify someone with an anxious attachment style, usually through careful observation of how quickly they respond to messages, how much reassurance they seek, how they react to perceived distance. Then systematically create situations that trigger their attachment anxiety while positioning yourself as the solution. You become both the disease and the cure. And because the relief feels so powerful after the manufactured anxiety, they bond to you in ways that healthy relationships never achieve. I want you to think about your last relationship, or your current one. Think about the moments you felt most intensely drawn to that person. Were you relaxed, confident, secure, or were you anxious, uncertain, desperately trying to figure out where you stood? Because here's the truth nobody wants to hear. If your strongest feelings for someone emerge when you're in distress, you might not be in love. You might be in danger, and your body knows it. That racing heart isn't trying to pull you closer. It's trying to get you to run. But here's the cruelest joke of all. Once you've been conditioned to associate anxiety with attraction, calm becomes boring. Healthy people feel flat. Partners who are consistent, available, emotionally regulated, they don't spike your system the way you've learned to expect. You sit across from someone kind and your body barely reacts. And you interpret that as lack of chemistry, rather than what it actually is, the absence of threat. You've been trained to equate safety with indifference and danger with passion. And the architects of your confusion? They're already moving on to their next project, leaving you wondering why you can't stop thinking about someone who never really cared whether you could breathe around them or not. So ask yourself this, and be honest. When you think about the person you can't get out of your head, does your chest tighten or open? Because the answer will tell you everything you need to know about whether you're dealing with love or something much darker. Now let me show you how deep this rabbit hole goes. There's a reason why some people are exceptionally good at this game, and it has nothing to do with charisma or charm. It's about pattern recognition. They've learned to read your nervous system better than you can. A study from the University of Amsterdam in 2019 tracked eye movements and micro-expressions during early-stage dating. The researchers found that individuals with dark triad personality traits, that's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, were significantly better at identifying anxious attachment styles within the first 7 minutes of conversation. 7 minutes. That's how long it takes for them to map your vulnerabilities and begin the exploitation protocol. They're not falling for you. They're diagnosing you. Let me introduce you to someone. I'll call him Marcus, though that's not his real name. Marcus came to therapy not because he wanted to change, but because his girlfriend insisted after their third breakup. He was remarkably honest in our sessions, the kind of honesty that makes your skin crawl. He described his dating strategy with clinical precision. He specifically targeted women who seemed high-functioning but anxious, women who had their lives together professionally but showed signs of relationship insecurity. How did he identify them? He watched how quickly they over-explained themselves, how they laughed a little too hard at his jokes, how they checked their phones constantly as if expecting bad news. These weren't red flags to him. They were green lights. He knew that underneath the competent exterior was someone whose nervous system was already primed for chaos. All he had to do was activate it. His method was surgical. Early dates were perfect, attentive, creating what he called the baseline of hope. He'd text good morning, ask about their day, remember small details. This lasted exactly long enough for them to believe they'd finally found someone emotionally available. Then came what he described as the intermittent phase. He'd disappear for a day, then come back with a reasonable excuse and extra affection. The relief they felt, that surge of reconnection, was more powerful than anything in the baseline phase. He was teaching their nervous system that his absence created pain and his presence created euphoria. Classic operant conditioning, except the subject didn't know they were in an experiment. Within weeks, he said, they were completely hooked. His words, not mine. And the most disturbing part? He didn't see himself as manipulative. He saw himself as efficient. He was just giving people the intensity they secretly craved. The neuroscience behind why this works is almost elegant in its brutality. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes fear and emotional significance, can't distinguish between different types of arousal very well. When your heart rate increases, your palms sweat, your breathing shallows, the amygdala marks that experience as important, as meaningful. It stamps it with emotional significance. Now your prefrontal cortex, the rational part, tries to make sense of why you're so activated. If you're on a roller coaster, it says, this is fun fear. If you're giving a presentation, it says, this is performance anxiety. But if you're with someone attractive who keeps you perpetually off balance, your prefrontal cortex often lands on, this must be intense attraction. It's a misdiagnosis, but it's a convincing one because the physical sensations are identical. There's a particular psychiatric phenomenon that explains why this confusion persists, even when you know better. Cognitive dissonance with a trauma bond twist. You've invested time, emotion, maybe love into this person. You've told your friends about them, imagined a future, rearranged your life. To accept that what you feel is manufactured anxiety rather than authentic passion means accepting that you've been fooled, that your judgment failed you, that those sleepless nights were symptoms of harm rather than devotion. The psychological cost of that admission is enormous. So your brain does something protective but ultimately destructive. It doubles down on the passion narrative. It finds evidence that supports the love story and dismisses the mounting proof of dysfunction. You become an unreliable narrator of your own experience, and the person exploiting your anxiety becomes the only character that makes sense in the story you're telling yourself. I had a patient once, brilliant woman, PhD in neuroscience ironically enough, who recognized this pattern in herself and still couldn't break free. She could describe the biochemical processes happening in her body, could cite studies on intermittent reinforcement, understood intellectually that she was being manipulated, but knowledge didn't protect her. Because the anxiety, passion, confusion isn't happening in your intellect. It's happening in your limbic system, in parts of your brain that don't speak the language of logic. She'd sit in my office and explain exactly what her boyfriend was doing to keep her destabilized. Then she'd see his name on her phone and her whole body would light up. Not with joy, with activation. And she'd convinced herself that intensity meant they were meant to be together. She finally left him not through insight, but through exhaustion. Her nervous system simply couldn't sustain the constant activation anymore. That's usually how these relationships end. Not with clarity, but with collapse. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough: the role of your own history in making you susceptible to this confusion. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where approval had to be earned, where emotional safety was unpredictable, then anxiety probably feels like home to you. Not comfortable, but familiar. And familiarity, even painful familiarity, reads as rightness to your nervous system. There's research showing that children of parents with inconsistent emotional availability are more likely as adults to experience intense attraction to partners who replicate that inconsistency. It's not that you're attracted to people who hurt you. It's that your nervous system recognizes the pattern of uncertainty and mistakes recognition for compatibility. You're not seeking pain. You're seeking the familiar sensation of working for love, of earning safety, of proving your worth. And manipulators can smell that from across a crowded room. The cruelest evolutionary trick is that this vulnerability likely served a purpose once. In environments where resources were scarce and protection was necessary, being highly attuned to the emotional states of powerful others kept you alive. Anxiety around those who controlled your survival made you vigilant, careful, adaptive. But we're not in that environment anymore, except your nervous system doesn't know that. It's still running software designed for a world where rejection could mean death. So when someone triggers your attachment system through inconsistency, your brain treats it like a survival issue. And survival issues get priority processing. They hijack your decision-making, override your rational mind, convince you that maintaining this connection matters more than your peace, your sleep, your sense of self. You're not weak for falling into this trap. You're responding exactly as your biology was designed to respond. The problem is that what kept your ancestors alive is now keeping you trapped. Let me tell you about the recovery process, because it's not what you think. You don't wake up one day and suddenly see clearly. The fog doesn't just lift. What happens is more gradual and more painful. You start noticing the physical sensations without the story. You feel your chest tighten when they text, and instead of thinking, "I miss them so much," you think, "My body's afraid." You recognize the relief you feel when they're nice as the ending of a pain they caused, not the presence of something good. You begin to distinguish between the craving for them and the craving for the anxiety to stop. And slowly, agonizingly slowly, you realize that you've been in a relationship with your own stress response more than with an actual person. They were just the trigger. The relationship was between you and your cortisol. The recovery is uncomfortable because calm starts to feel wrong. Your nervous system, accustomed to constant activation, interprets peace as danger. It's called relaxation-induced anxiety. And it's why so many people leave toxic relationships only to immediately enter new ones with the same dynamic. You're not looking for another person. You're looking for the familiar hum of stress that's become your baseline. Healthy relationships feel boring because boring is actually just the absence of constant threat. But your system has been recalibrated to need the spike, the drop, the uncertainty. Learning to tolerate, then eventually prefer, emotional stability is like learning to enjoy a new cuisine after years of eating only one thing. It takes exposure, patience, and a willingness to sit with the discomfort of something unfamiliar. And here's what the manipulators know that you're just learning. You'll probably go back, not because you're stupid or weak, but because the first time you try to leave, your body goes through something that feels exactly like withdrawal, because it is withdrawal. You've been getting hits of relief dopamine every time they came back after disappearing, every time they were sweet after being cold. Your brain has associated them with the neurochemical reward, even though they're also the source of the pain. So when you cut contact, you don't just miss them. You go through actual physiological withdrawal, insomnia, intrusive thoughts, physical pain, obsessive checking for messages. It feels so much like heartbreak that you think it must mean you really love them. But addiction and love produce remarkably similar symptoms. The difference is that one gets better with distance and one gets worse. So let's talk about identification, because recognition is the only weapon you have against this. There are specific markers, behavioral signatures, that separate anxiety-based attachment from genuine connection. First, track your body. Not your thoughts, not your feelings, your actual physical body. Keep a log for 2 weeks. Every time you interact with this person or think about them, write down what your body does. Heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, stomach sensations, sleep quality that night. If the dominant pattern is activation rather than relaxation, If being with them feels more like preparing for battle than coming home, you have your answer. Real attraction includes moments of peace. Anxious attachment is all spike, no baseline. Your body is giving you data. You're just not listening because you've been taught to privilege your emotions over your physiology. Second marker, notice what you're actually craving. There's a simple test I use in therapy. Close your eyes and imagine this person being consistently kind, available, and predictable for 6 months. No drama, no disappearing acts, no emotional roller coasters, just stable, warm, present. Does that image fill you with relief and joy? Or does it feel flat, even slightly disappointing? Be honest. Because if consistent goodness sounds boring, you're not in love with them. You're in love with the chaos. You're addicted to the neurochemical cascade of the reunion after the rupture, and that's not a relationship. That's a habit. A painful, destructive habit that's been misidentified as destiny. Third marker, and this one's harder to face. Examine what you're not doing when you're consumed by this person. Are you neglecting friendships, abandoning hobbies, letting your work slip, ignoring your health? Anxious attachment consumes resources. It's metabolically expensive to maintain constant hypervigilance. Your nervous system is running on overdrive, which means other systems get deprioritized. You stop taking care of yourself because all your energy is devoted to managing the relationship uncertainty. Meanwhile, people in secure, healthy relationships tend to expand. They have more energy, not less. They're better at their jobs, more present with friends, more creative, more alive. If this person's presence in your life is making you smaller, dimmer, more anxious, then what you're calling love is actually a slow form of self-abandonment. Let me share one more case with you, because this one shows how deep the programming goes. Patient in his 40s, successful, divorced, thought he'd learned from past mistakes, started dating a woman who seemed perfect on paper, intelligent, attractive, shared his interests, but within weeks he was obsessing. Couldn't focus at work, checking his phone constantly, feeling anxious when she didn't respond immediately. He knew the signs. He'd been through this before, so he did something radical. He went to his doctor and got a heart rate monitor, the kind athletes use. He wore it for a month and tracked his heart rate during all interactions with her. The data was devastating. His resting heart rate around her was 15 beats per minute higher than his baseline. When she texted, his heart rate spiked as if he'd received a threat, and when she was warm and attentive, it normalized. He was literally living in a state of mild cardiac stress whenever she was in his life. He showed her the data, thinking she'd be horrified. She laughed it off, said he was overthinking, told him to stop being so analytical. That's when he realized she needed him anxious. His stability threatened her sense of control. He ended it that week, and his resting heart rate dropped back to normal within 10 days. 10 days. That's how quickly his body recovered once the source of manufactured stress was removed. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth about who's most likely to exploit this confusion. People who are themselves trapped in it. The cycle perpetuates because those who've learned to associate anxiety with love don't just fall victim to it, they eventually propagate it. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but inevitably. If you grew up thinking love means constant uncertainty, you'll unconsciously create uncertainty in your relationships because without it, you don't feel the charge you've been conditioned to need. You're not trying to hurt anyone, you're trying to feel something, but the impact is the same. You become the unstable bridge that someone else's heart rate accelerates on, and you mistake their fear for desire, just like someone once did with you. The cycle is intergenerational, passed down like trauma, disguised as passion. There's a particular cruelty to this pattern in the age of dating apps and endless options. The technology has created perfect conditions for anxiety-based attachment to flourish. The intermittent reinforcement is built into the infrastructure. Messages come and go unpredictably. People ghost, breadcrumb, orbit. You're never sure where you stand because the platforms are designed to keep you uncertain, keep you checking, keep you activated. And in that state of constant low-grade anxiety, anyone who provides momentary relief feels like a soulmate. You're not responding to who they actually are. You're responding to the fact that they temporarily quieted your nervous system in an environment designed to keep it screaming. Dating apps haven't made it easier to find love, they've made it easier to confuse anxiety management with romantic connection. The research on this is still emerging, but what we're seeing is alarming. A longitudinal study from 2022 tracked couples who met on dating apps versus those who met in traditional settings. The app-based couples reported higher initial intensity, faster progression to commitment, and significantly higher rates of anxious attachment behaviors. They also had a 42% higher breakup rate within the first year. The intensity that felt like compatibility was actually instability. The quick escalation that felt like when you know, was actually two nervous systems finding temporary relief in each other. And when the novelty wore off, when the anxiety relief cycle normalized, they realized they'd built a relationship on a foundation of shared dysregulation rather than actual compatibility. So what's the antidote? How do you reprogram a nervous system that's been taught to equate love with fear? It starts with something that sounds simple but feels impossible. You have to learn to tolerate being uninteresting to yourself. Most people in these patterns are running from something, usually boredom or emptiness or the terrifying quiet of their own company. The chaos of anxious attachment fills that void. It gives you something to think about, obsess over, something that makes you feel alive even if it's killing you slowly. Recovery means sitting with the absence of that intensity. It means evenings alone where nothing dramatic happens and learning that this isn't emptiness, it's peace. It means dating someone who doesn't spike your system and staying anyway, giving your nervous system time to recalibrate, to learn that safety isn't the same as apathy. You also have to grieve. This is the part nobody talks about. You have to grieve the version of love you thought you were supposed to have. The all-consuming, can't eat, can't sleep movie version of romance, because that version is a lie, or at least it's unsustainable. Real long-term love is quieter. It's your nervous system recognizing safety and relaxing into it. It's attraction without anxiety, desire without desperation. But if you've been conditioned to believe that calm means you're settling, you'll sabotage every healthy relationship you encounter, always seeking the next hit of intensity, the next person who makes your heart race for all the wrong reasons. The grief is necessary because you're not just leaving a person when you break these patterns. You're leaving an entire narrative about what love is supposed to feel like. Here's what I need you to understand. The people who exploit this confusion aren't always monsters. Sometimes they're just as lost as you are, running their own scripts, avoiding their own voids. That doesn't make it okay. That doesn't mean you stay. But it does mean you can stop looking for the villain and start looking at the system that taught you chaos equals passion, the system that modeled inconsistent love and called it normal, the system that told you if it doesn't hurt a little, it's not real. That system is the enemy, not necessarily the person who learned to operate within it. And finally, here's the question you need to ask yourself, the one that cuts through all the rationalization and confusion. If you remove the anxiety, what would be left? If this person was consistent, available, emotionally regulated, if your nervous system never spiked around them, would you still want them? Would there be enough substance, enough compatibility, enough genuine connection to sustain interest? Or would the whole thing collapse without the adrenaline holding it together? Because if anxiety is the main ingredient in your attraction, you don't have a relationship. You have a symptom, and symptoms don't love you back. They just keep appearing until you deal with the underlying condition. Like your chest tightening isn't passion, it's a warning. And every time you ignore it, every time you reframe your body's distress as desire, you're choosing the confusion over your own clarity. The people who know this about you, who leverage it, who need you anxious to feel powerful, they're counting on you to keep making that choice. The only way out is to start believing your body over your story, to trust the tightness over the narrative, to recognize that if love makes you smaller, quieter, more afraid, then whatever you're calling it, it isn't love. It's just fear wearing a prettier name. And you deserve better than spending your life mistaking your nervous system's screams for the whispers of your heart.